Welcome to the Fabulous Fifties and Beyond. I'm Jim Pollard, your co-host with my wife Jeanetta. Today we're going to be talking about the Lourdes Hospice Program in Western Kentucky. It's a very important program, and it's a program that needs some volunteers. So we want to be talking about the different aspects of the program and what it does. You stay tuned and we'll be right back.
And he'd say, go with what you got. Start from where you are. Give it your best shot. Keep reaching for that star. Get in the race. Keep your own pace. Keep moving and never stop. Just go. Go with what you got.
I'm Jim Pollard, your co-host with my wife Jeanetta. Today we're going to be talking about the Lourdes Hospice Program. Our guest is Jeff Steward. Jeff is the Bereavement Counselor with the Lourdes Hospice Program in Western Kentucky. Jeff, I think the best thing we can start out by saying is, what area does this program encompass?
Well, the Bereavement Program covers any age group. We work with families after they've lost a loved one. We try to put special emphasis on the spouse or the children, of course. But it also encompasses children's ministry, working with them and trying to help them with their grief. Children have a hard time expressing their grief, and so we try to give them tools and give the parents tools to work with them. And so it encompasses a pretty large area. We work with churches, do support groups. We do offer grief workshops all over the 10-county area of Western Kentucky and 3 counties in southern Illinois. So we offer a lot. We have memorial services, work with funeral homes. They sponsor all of our workshops. So there's a pretty big area that we cover. And it does cover, you do not have to be, you do not have to lose a loved one in hospice to be part of our bereavement program. It's open to the community and it's all free.
So, so that's the interesting thing that I think our viewing audience needs to know is that if someone out there has lost someone in the last anywhere from 1 day to a year, I guess, even if they weren't in the hospice program, they can be a part of the bereavement program.
Yes, they can come to any support group, any workshop, one-on-one counseling with either any of us chaplains that deal with bereavement. They get the same services that family members in hospice do.
And it's no charge?
No charge.
What are some of the, I guess, not being familiar with the workshops and grief workshops, Jeanette and I went to a death and dying session, it was a couple of things that we went to one year, and it was interesting some of the things that we saw there. In fact, one of the sessions was at Lourdes, conducted by some of the nurses and sisters over there, and I just wonder if this was probably leading up to what a bereavement program would be.
Well, I think you have to understand bereavement starts with a diagnosis. I mean, when a family gets a terminal diagnosis, that's when the grief program really starts, because they have to adjust to that. They have to adjust to seeing their family member decline. So there's a lot of issues. So they do all work hand in hand with what bereavement does. And our staff at hospice, they're unique. Our nurses and our social workers, all of the different ministries, they all understand where this is going. And so they all work and they observe the family and we relate to each other on what specific needs are and how we can cover different areas. So, I mean, it all works hand in hand.
It's interesting. I'd never thought of grief or bereavement starting at the diagnosis.
But if you know it's terminal, I can understand how that does, because it's a blow when they first hear it.
It is. I have a unique, well, not a unique situation, but my dad died on hospice 6 years ago, and when all that took place, he battled cancer, went through all the treatments, and then was placed on hospice. I kept a journal, and I've been able to take a look at that journal every now and then and be able to relate to the families and the situations that's going on, because even though all grief is different and everybody mourns differently, there's still similarities in there which you can take from your own experiences to help a family and encourage them.
You know, we think of immediate grief, but I was talking with a cousin of mine just yesterday, and asked her how long her husband had been dead. She said 15 years. And then she went on to say, I still miss him. You know, that just kind of threw me, because I think you get over things. And you don't really get over things, some things, do you?
Grief is something you can get through, but it's not anything you ever get over. Like I said, 6 years ago, I still miss my dad greatly, you know. Grief is hard work. It's something that you have to have a mindset that you're going to take charge of the situation. And you talked about the short-term grief. It's very interesting that you said that, because so many people, especially in our culture of Western Kentucky, we look at grief as the mourning. That's the time you mourn over a loss. And once you are through with the mourning and all the crying is over, you need to get over it and move on. But mourning is a short period, the mourning period is, and then you have the grief period that sometimes it takes years. Sometimes people never deal with it properly, and this life is never the same. The thing about working through grief over a long period of time is your life will never be the same when you've lost a loved one, but you can still be productive. And you can still honor their memories, and you can still do things which maybe if it was your spouse you lost that you had done together, and still have opportunities. So I think when you really deal with your grief, you're able to move on and take steps ahead, but you never really get over it.
But a lot of people just take it really differently, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
I know I had a friend who lost her husband with a heart attack, just like, you know, he just went. And he was, you know, nobody would have ever thought about him dying with a heart attack. He was not that much overweight, and his health was good, but one day he was just gone. And she was just devastated because she didn't get to say goodbye to him. And just a meticulous housekeeper and everything, and she just didn't care about nothing. She didn't care if the grass grew up to the roof or what happened, but she got over it. But then some people cope with it a lot better. So I think it depends upon the person.
It depends a lot on personality, depends on reading, meditating, I think talking. One of the things I've noticed about grief is if you can find somebody to talk to that'll really listen, never get tired of hearing the same old story over and over, that really is a wonderful release. And some people just feel like they can't talk about it because they don't want to cry. And crying is a natural emotion God gave us to deal with loss and other situations. Jesus wept. So, you know, I think there's so many things that people don't realize as part of grief. They think it's abnormal if they cry a lot. They think it's abnormal if they talk a lot, but it's not.
Well, sometimes I think people try to avoid talking about the person who died to the person who, you know, who was really close to them. And I think that's probably a mistake too, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Because they really want to talk about.
In a lot of situations, it seems like to me that family members have a hard time talking about the loved one to each other. But each family member may have a friend that they go out and can communicate with. I think maybe with the family member there's too much emotion or whatever, but yes, if you can just talk and talk and talk, that's one of the greatest gifts God's given us.
But so many times, you know, you go, everybody's there when somebody's dying, or they're in the hospital and they know they're dying. They're around them, they do things for them, then the services, everybody's there. And then after that, it kind of slows down, doesn't it? Everybody thinks, well, you know, they go on about their business, and that's when they really, really continue to need somebody.
That's when it really hits them. I had a lady the other day tell me, she says, seems like since the funeral I haven't seen anybody from my church.
Yeah.
And I hear that so many times. And really, it's our culture. You know, I think the mindset of our churches maybe and people in this area are to minister to them while they're sick and see them through the funeral, and then when you get back, everybody goes back and it's normal lives for them, but that's when it's really tough on the person going through it. So, you know, we also work with training churches, and we're working with 2 churches here in Paducah right now to just train people to follow up and continue the ministry, at least get them through the first year.
Well, if I understand what you're saying, and this may not be a good analogy, but to some point, grief itself is like a sickness. And when the person dies, within the next week, the grief is not over. It doesn't heal itself. It's a healing process
Right.
that goes on and on and on. And therefore, people need to be involved in that process with the person who's grieving.
Right. It is, and it's not like a mental illness or anything like that, but it is something that works in your mind, that works and weighs heavy on your heart. You're missing somebody, you miss conversations, you see something you both would have liked and you holler at them, or you pick up the phone and try to call them, and so it is in that way kind of an illness. But at the same time, it's very dangerous, because if people do not deal with their grief properly, it can affect them physically.
We were watching a program on KET just the other night. I don't know if it was last night or the night before, and it was a documentary on biscuits. And they would go into these different restaurants where they have the biscuits, the different kinds of biscuits. And I knew that they were going to go to this one restaurant in Nashville, Tennessee called Lourdes. And I had a dear friend who died about 3 years ago, and almost every time we went to Nashville, we had to go to that restaurant and eat, because they had the best country ham and biscuits around. And I looked at Jeanette and I says, that's where every of us would want to go eat, you know. And you see things, and it brings back those memories, you know. And I guess it's good just to talk about them at the time and speak about it, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's very good, very therapeutic.
Yeah.
I encourage people to put together photo albums. I know when my dad died, for a while all I could remember him was being sick, with his hair gone from the chemo, and you know, his being heavier than normal or thinner than normal. But after a while, I got to remembering Dad healthy.
Yeah.
And I think that was part of the healing process. I don't picture him sick anymore. I picture him healthy and remember a lot of good times and laughs.
Because they do look so sad when they've lost all their hair, and it's just, and I think it's degrading, especially for women. They feel, you know, it really makes them feel, I don't know how it makes them feel, but I don't think it's good.
Their entire countenance changes.
Right.
Well, Jeff, we're going to take a break. Then we'll come back, and one thing I want to talk about is Camp Robin.
Good deal.
And because I'm excited about that, and I think that that's something that our people need to know about. So you stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Around the place and staring us down on prices, well, I was angry. Didn't seem to bother my father, though. He had me load another bushel of apples in their trunk. I learned later on that this family was in need.
The greatest gift we give, it's in our heart, what we believe, the way we live.
Caring for others. Pass it on.
And he'd say, go with what you got. Start from where you are. Give it your best shot. Keep reaching for that star. Get in the race. Keep your own pace. Keep moving and never stop. Just go. Go with what you got.
I'm Jim Pollard, your co-host with my wife Jeanetta, and our guest today is Jeff Steward. and we're talking about bereavement and grief. Jeff is Bereavement Counselor with Lourdes Hospice here in Western Kentucky. And before we actually, I want us to talk about Camp Robin, Jeff, but before we do, let's talk about some of the needs of hospice. And that's one of the things that we wanted to emphasize in these programs is the need for volunteers. And as you were saying earlier before we started the show, the need is not only for volunteer people who will visit and go one-on-one, but you could use somebody in your office. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, we could really use anybody that would be able to come in and type up some letters and mail letters, a lot of office work to be done, make copies, just anything like that would be a great help. There's always a need for people to sit out with patients or help with the bereavement program as far as maybe going out and visiting someone at a funeral home that you're familiar with. But still in the office, I think, is one need that we all have. Our program is growing so fast that it's hard to keep up with the clerical stuff. And
well, I think it's important that our viewers understand that, because sometimes when we talk about a volunteer for a program, especially one like hospice, they think, no, I can't go out and talk. I just don't have the makeup, psychological makeup to go out and deal with death like that or grief with the individual who's just lost a loved one. But they may have very good administrative, clerical abilities and would love to contribute that. Now, I'm sure that our director's putting up on the screen how they can get in touch, because we've got the address, and you're on Jackson Street, right?
2855 Jackson Street.
And the telephone number?
For Susan Mason, our volunteer coordinator, is 415-3640.
Okay, and the 244 number, is that the hospital number?
444-2444, that's at the hospital.
They just ask for hospice, right?
They can ask for hospice, or they can dial 415-3636, and that'll get our intake office. So.
Okay, so it's important that they understand that there are a lot of ways that their abilities can be used. And that's one thing that we try to do on this show, is we try to show people the opportunities that are out there, and then we tell them, don't wait to be asked, go volunteer.
Right.
Because there's a lot of talent and abilities that's not being used that could be.
Right. There's even a lot of students that I think if they realize they could go in and do some clerical work in the college setting, or even in high schools, if our high schools were made aware that maybe to help with typing classes or anything, computer classes and Microsoft Office classes, they could volunteer work for hospice.
And don't some of the schools today require a certain amount of community service?
I'm not aware of that. There may be.
I know that there are some classes, because I mentored teenagers for a while, and they would tell me they were volunteering over here because they need it as part of their class, you know, where they were doing things like this. So it's
that would be very good.
Something for them to look at. Now, our show is aimed at people 50 and older, so parents, you tell your kids about it.
Or grandkids.
Or grandkids.
There you go.
Yeah. But let's talk about Camp Robin. And first, I think you need to tell them what it is and what it does and when it is, and how they can help.
Well, Camp Robin is a camp designed for kids ages 5 to 12. And what we do with this camp is provide grief counseling. We give them tools to deal with their grief, but it's in an environment which is relaxing, which is fun. We have game time. We're going to have a petting zoo and face painting. All the kids will get their own shirts, and they'll get to put together a scrapbook. We provide the scrapbook, and we ask the family members to bring in pictures. So it's really a camp that's designed to just give the kids the resources they need to deal with their grief. Because what happens is, number one, kids don't know how to express a lot of their feelings when it comes to grief. But also, another thing is, if they've lost, say, a grandparent or a sibling, the way their parents deal with their grief is pushed on the child. And it's done inadvertently, but that's not always healthy for that child. They need to understand and learn how to grieve that loss themselves with their own personality, their own feelings. And last year we had 20 kids. We had 60 volunteers. And we really, because of the teamwork of everybody setting up the camp and the work of the volunteers that day. I think the kids all really left there that day with the sense that they had done some healing. And then what was really great is a month later we had a little reunion at Chuck E. Cheese, which everybody loves to go there.
All the kids.
The
All the
kids.
yeah. But it was really neat. They brought back their scrapbooks,
Right.
and they had continued. They didn't get their scrapbooks finished, but they had continued putting stuff in there and continued really dealing with the losses that they had suffered. So it was really a good camp.
I know you were telling us about one child, and we won't call any names, in our training. Kind of relate that story if you feel like you can.
Well, this child had just from the time he was 4 until he was 9, had suffered multiple losses. It's really one of the hardest things that I've ever dealt with. I was his pastor, worked with him a lot, and he had suffered so many losses that I don't think he really knew how to deal with it. And he came to camp, and he was 11 when he came last year, and I think it really helped him. It really was an encouragement to him to know that crying's okay, or having bad days is okay, and I think it helped his aunt, which he was living with, to really come up with some ideas, because at camp we also offer a class in the morning for the adults, parents, dealing with your own grief, and then in the afternoon we offer a seminar on helping your children through grief. So she sat through both of those, and I think she was able to carry some tools and resources into continuing helping this little fella work through a lot of losses.
What about the balloon release?
Well, the balloon release is something that during counseling time we read them a book, Where Do Balloons Go? And this year we're going to read a book called Grandma's Song, which is a really neat little book. But we also give them a time during that counseling time and book reading time to write a little note to whoever they lost. And then at the end of the day, we tie those notes onto a string which is attached to a balloon, and we all get to go out and release those balloons. And I think it gives a little bit of sense of closure, a little sense of release. Got to say something maybe you didn't get to say, maybe a goodbye, anything like that, or an apology. A lot of apologies last year on those cards. So the balloon release is a really neat time. It's really encouraging.
It sounds like it would really be something. And when is it this year?
The camp is on at April 28th. It's at Kyler Park in First Baptist Church here in Paducah. First Baptist lets us use some of their facilities, and then we do a lot of the outdoor stuff right there in Kyler Park on Nom and Broadway. It starts at 9 o'clock in the morning and will go to 3 in the afternoon. And we provide lunch for anybody that comes, even the parents, if parents want to stay. So we provide a pretty good service all day long.
Mm-hmm. Now, when we were doing our training, you talked about and showed us some different books that are available. Talk about some of the visual material that's available for people who are going through grief and bereavement, because some of it was really good stuff.
There is so much available on grief and bereavement that has come out over the last 5 years. It's amazing. 20 years ago, you couldn't hardly find anything. Now it's everywhere. I was at a Christian bookstore yesterday, just stopping to try to find a certain book for one of my family members, and had to order it, but they had like 39 books on grief.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of resources out there. My favorite one that I always refer to is if you've lost a spouse, a book called The Lonely House by Lowell Erdahl. He's a Lutheran pastor up in Minnesota, is one of the greatest books. It's a 16-week devotional. Through hospice, we provide a lot of stuff for kids. We follow each family in the bereavement program for a year, and over that year they get 4 books, and they're just small books, but each of them deals with a different level of grief at a different time in that year. So there's just so many resources out there, and we try to keep a running list of them.
Well, go ahead.
Is that the one that you had talked to us about? You know, we talked to you about our friend in Florida who had lost his wife a year ago November, and he's still just absolutely devastated.
The Lonely House, yes, that's the one.
Okay.
Wonderful book.
Yeah. Well, I wanted our people to understand that I mean, there's people out there right now that have lost a loved one, a husband or wife, or just recently,
Or a child.
or a child, or just recently, that could take advantage of these materials that would help them, but they didn't know about it.
Right.
So they need to call you.
Yes, they can call the office, and
office.
we will get them any resource that we can get our hand on to help them. Sometimes, you know, there are certain situations, suicide, you know, maybe a sudden loss, that we have some books that we try to get them to get, that we keep, you know, we try to be familiar with all the books so that we can refer them to the one that we would feel that would help them the most. But also, I refer several people to counseling and professional counselors that are specialized or.
Well, I appreciate, because I've pastored down through the years, and that's sometimes I give somebody a book because I felt like, you know, this book will help you at this point in at your station in life with what you're going through, and sometimes they'll sit down and read that in the quietness, where we could talk all day long and they wouldn't hear us. That was the thing. And if they read it, it speaks to them.
And that brings up another point about needing volunteers. It would be nice that even if you would like to deal with patients, but family members, but not go out there, but help follow up. You know, are you reading your book? That you I mean, they're a really easy read. They're short little, basically pamphlets, but they have a lot of good information in them. And I think sometimes the follow up is very important. Just to hear somebody, hey, did you get to read your book, or
Right.
could we send you anything else, or is there anything specific? So,
Well, Jeff, we're out of time. Believe it or not. It is quick, and we're so glad that you were with us today. And we want to encourage you out there in the audience that we need volunteers. Hospice needs volunteers. We want to encourage you to take part in the program. Get in touch with them. The address is on the screen, and our address is there also. And we want to encourage you to be around to hear all of our programs. We'll be talking about hospice again over the next few weeks, and we encourage you to watch our shows each and every week. Remember, you can get in touch with us over the internet at thefabulousfifties.net, or you can write us, and our address is, Jeanetta?
P.O. Box 7, Bose, Kentucky, 42027.
Remember, use it or lose it.
Can't see as well as I used to. Can't run as far or as fast. Sometimes I think that the old me is becoming exactly that. But when I start thinking of all I don't have,